Now, when I began to research my first contribution to the project on Wales and the French Revolution, an anthology of texts from the periodical press in Wales, I was directed towards the 3 radical Welsh language periodicals which Welsh dissenters amazingly succeeded to produce in the mid-1790s. It was well known that the first newspaper in Wales was not founded until 1804, when the Swansea Cambrian came into being. And the altogether 70 numbers of radical Welsh periodical literature, which was published between 1793 and 1796, would have been more than enough to keep me busy and fill a volume. However, reading John James Evans's Dylanwad y Chwyldro Ffrengig ar Lenyddiaeth Cymru, the influence of the French Revolution on Welsh literature, I stumbled across a half sentence which had been appended by the dissenting ministers of the 3 counties of Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire and Cardiganshire to a resolution in support of government and king, which they had passed at a crisis meeting in January 1793. At the bottom of the page of this resolution it said that the above resolutions be signed by the chairman and inserted in the English Chronicle, the Bristol and Hereford papers. As a result, the volume of Welsh responses to the French Revolution is very different to the one I originally envisaged. The added sentence, which turned out to be very typical for these types of resolutions, set me on a course of considering which newspapers may have been read in Wales at the time, and wondering whether they just imported information into Wales, or whether they also served as channels of communication from Wales into England and within Wales. I found ample evidence that the gentry and the upper classes had been enjoying reading periodicals and newspapers from urban and metropolitan England since the beginning of the 18th century. In 1738, Robert Pritchard, a sea captain from Pentraeth, Anglesey, noted that it was, a na I ddarllen yn Gymraeg, pleser llawer Cymro i'w darllen newyddion Saesneg, Caer neu Llundain. Chwiliam chwedl rhyfedd newydd, ni waith o ble, byd gwir, byd celwydd. And the translation is at the bottom of the slide. The correspondence of the influential Morris brothers shows that Richard, the naval officer in London, regularly dispatched newspapers to William, the customs officer in Holyhead, and to Lewis, who superintended crown mines here in deepest Cardiganshire. In the second half of the century, small squires, such as John Johns of Dolai-Cothi, Carmarthenshire, whose diaries and papers are also here at the National Library, normally got their paper every day. If it didn't arrive, its absence was noted with a vexed, received no paper. Squire Thomas Lloyd of Cwmgloen commissioned local poet John Jenkin, Johan Schenken, to compose a poem in praise of the postmaster of Narberth for delivering the news. Lower down the social ranks, similar processes were at work. As early as 1774, the Arminian schoolmaster David Davis of Castell Llywel eulogised his local postmaster, Ivan a Post, or Ivan the Post, who brought the international news to the Vale of Aberaeron. Hanesion ynysoedd a mawrion deyrnasoedd, a gweidlyd ryfeloedd ei lluoedd a'i lled, a geidwyd y goden sy'n llawn hyd ei deipen, a chymain a Llundain ei llewndyd. And the two heads referred to there, this refers to the bag, the post bag hung from the front and from the back. And those of you who've ever seen images of Iolo Morgannwg, he was a similar kind of satchel. So it's got two ends and they're stuffed full with news. North Walian poets and authors, such as Walter Davies, Awa Gwallta Mechain, and David Thomas, Dafydd the Eryri, copied from publications like, wait for it, the Ladies' Magazine, the Salopian Journal, and Fox's Journal. South Walian radicals, like Iolo Morgannwg and Thomas Glencothi, read the Bristol Journal and the Hereford Journal, and ordered newspapers such as the Cambridge Intelligencer from further afield. Once a newspaper had reached Wales, we may safely assume that it was read by more than one person. In the late 1780s, the adventurous Englishwoman Elizabeth Baker of Dolgellau, whose diaries and letters are also here at the National Library, copied poetry and prose from over 20 different periodical publications. She didn't buy any of these, but was lent them by her neighbour, the well-known poet and editor of Gorchestion Bay of Cymru, Rhys Jones, whose regular parcels, and as noted in her diary, she obviously enjoyed. When her neighbour, ship carpenter William Luke, inquired if he might borrow them, she refused, but agreed, and I quote, to read to him, which the man said was preferable to reading it himself, ingenuously confessing he could not have understood many paragraphs that he asked me to explain. Thus, even people who could not read English, or couldn't read at all, may have enjoyed a newspaper being read to them. In addition to this private reading, early subscription libraries, book clubs, inns and coffee houses advertised that they were hiring out newspapers for reading. When this was made illegal in 1789 under a penalty of £5, traders switched to advertising their subscription reading room, which of course had newspapers in it, as was done in Swansea by Mrs. Oakey and her daughter, but also by Welsh inns such as the Black Lion in Aberystwyth, which advertised a well-stocked coffee room. The diaries, letters and commonplace books of a wide variety of people from different locations in Wales then tell us that English newspapers and periodicals were providing entertainment for Welsh readers and conveying news to them. Reviewing the titles I'd seen copied into manuscripts or mentioned in diaries, I noticed that some newspapers occurred again and again. All of them fell into the category of the provincial newspaper, a weekly publication geared towards and serving a certain area. While Wales had no such weekly within its borders before 1804, England counted over 70 by the end of the 18th century, as I found out thanks to the pioneering work of Hannah Barker. The English provincial papers published close to Offa's Dyke seem to have been read most in Wales. Indeed, they were more than partly geared towards Wales, because Wales, as you can see, was a comparatively underexploited market in an otherwise crowded scene. To the east, a plethora of provincial papers competed for customers. To the west was virgin territory. Now, in the first half of the 18th century, most of these provincial papers counted no more than 2 pages, and they were mainly filled with the official news gazettes from London and with general advertising, carrying little local or regional news. This changed in the second half of the century, when the papers became more important as platforms for local and regional news, advertisements, announcements, and even literature. The English language weeklies closest to Offa's Dyke reflect this, even at times in their names. The oldest, Adams's Weekly Current from Chester, did not change, but the Shrewsbury Chronicle, as you can see, called itself the Montgomeryshire, Denbighshire, Merionethshire and Flintshire Advertiser. The Chester Chronicle changed its title in 1792 to refer directly to North Wales, and the Salopian Journal was founded as the Courier of Wales. Not only their titles, but their distribution too, reflect the importance of Wales for their survival. The Hereford Journal, described as the provincial paper with the greatest unrivaled area of distribution in England by Barker, relied very heavily on Welsh readers and advertisers. 18 out of its 23 agents were in Wales, from Hay-on-Wye and Monmouth, hard by the English border, to the far western reaches of Pembrokeshire.